Hello everyone, welcome to our second Women and Girls Match Fund webinar. We'll just give it a minute to let people join as usual and then we'll get started. Hi to everyone who's just joining. We're just going to give it a minute to let everyone come in and then we'll get straight in. Ooh, so it is a minute past 12, so I think we'll jump straight in. As already mentioned, thank you all for joining us for our second Women and Girls Match Fund webinar, all focused on crafting compelling content. Today on the call, my name is Bethany, and I've got my colleague Sahil here joining me, and of course, Caitlin, who some of you may already know, but will introduce herself shortly. Just before we get started, just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So you'll see a chat function at the bottom of your Zoom panel. You'll just want to set that button to everyone and you'll be able to introduce yourself here, share your thoughts and ideas throughout the session, and of course, let us know if you have any issues at all. We'll also be taking questions and doing a bit of a Q&A at the end of the webinar. You'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Please do click on this and add in your questions here when you can. They can often get lost in the chat, so please do add them in here. Also, you'll be muted, of course, throughout the session, so if you do need to say anything at all, please do use that chat or Q&A box. And we also have a captions button at the bottom of your Zoom panel. So if you do need to add captions for any reason, you can enable them there. And just the final thing, we are recording this webinar as usual, so you'll be able to access this after the session, probably later today, if you want to share with any colleagues. I won't go through a full campaign recap. You should all know most of the campaign dates now, but if you do have any questions at all about the process, bank details, changing text, all of that admin-y stuff, we will be answering those questions and more on our Ask Us Anything webinar on Friday. If you can't attend that webinar, we will be recording the webinar, so you'll be able to access it probably by the afternoon on Friday or next week. And you can also send us an email at hello@biggive.org if you want to ask us your questions directly over email. But without further ado, I'll pass straight on to Caitlin.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for joining. It's great to see some kind of familiar names in the chat and also some new ones. Please do introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, what organization you're joining from. This is going to be a really interactive session, so we do want to hear from you. And for anyone who couldn't join Monday's session, just a quick recap of who I am and why I'm talking to you today. I'm Caitlin, I'm from IG Advisors. We're a strategy consulting firm, but we work exclusively on social and environmental change. And we work with a range of partners for the philanthropy, business, and nonprofit sectors, as you can see on the screen right now. And then yeah, I'm Caitlin, I'm your facilitator today. We are going to have a Q&A section at the end of the training today where you'll have a chance to ask me any questions. But if anything comes up between now and the campaign, you have my email address here. You can scan the QR code and get my LinkedIn. Please do feel free to reach out because very much here to support you all. And okay, so today's training is all about crafting compelling content for your campaign. So we're going to be thinking about campaign messaging and also different communication channels you might want to use. So in terms of the agenda, we're introducing the session right now, and I can see you're all introducing yourselves in the chat, so thank you so much for that. We're going to spend the first half of the session thinking about messaging, and particularly how do you message for women and girls causes? How do you message during cost of living? We're then going to spend the second half of the session thinking about communication channels and content, and we're going to focus particularly on social media and email comms, as they tend to be two kind of very common, popular mechanisms for this sort of crowdfunding campaign. And then we'll have time for questions and we'll wrap everything up. So the objectives: by the end of today, you'll have identified your key messaging points to leverage in your campaign. You'll have explored different communication channels, had a chance to get inspired by other fundraising campaigns, and you'll have had a chance to ask your burning questions. So before we kind of get started and I talk at you for a little bit, I would love to hear, what communication channels are you currently thinking about using to reach your supporters for this Match Fund campaign? So drop in the chat, quick kind of 15 seconds share out, what communication channels are you thinking about? Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, someone using email, MailChimp, someone using leaflets, so exploring also some potentially offline channels, web pages. Okay, that's a really great snapshot, and it's great that so many of you are thinking about social media and email, because we're going to be talking about that today. But also interesting, all the other platforms people are using, so websites, leaflets, sending letters out to previous donors, QR codes, YouTube, lots of really exciting channels we're exploring. And just wanted to quickly share here some of the channels that you might be thinking about. So you might be thinking about online channels like social media, your website, sending out emails, but also offline channels. So some of our key advice is, first of all, meet your donors where they're at. So if your donors are more ring me up, I want to hear from you that way, then give them a call. If you know that there's a really engaged community on social media, then use your social media platforms. But make sure you're going where your audiences are. Also, prioritize. So we always recommend, don't feel like you have to cover all of these communication channels. It's better to choose a couple and do them well than to spread yourselves out too thin. And yeah, just a very quick snapshot. So social media, it's great for reaching a large audience of everyday givers, used a lot in this sort of crowdfunding digital fundraising campaign. And there's a whole load of asks that you can make. So donate, share this post, spread the word, follow our Twitter page. So we're going to be talking about that a bit more later. Your website. Websites are often one of the first materials that donors will consult to understand your work. So think about, do you want to add some information to your website about your Match Fund campaign? Do you want to share a blog post on your website? Make sure that you're using that platform. Emails. So in the Big Gives experience, email communications can be really, really powerful for your match funding campaign. If people are kind of signed up to receive email communications from you, signed up to receive newsletters from you, then they're probably already quite interested and engaged in your work. So there's a really promising audience that you can reach with emails. But you also might want to think about calls and in-person meetings. And those are great for when you really want to tailor your communications. Maybe there's a donor that can give a slightly higher level and you want to have a proper conversation with them about your campaign. Events, so they do take some organizing. It can be resource intensive depending on what you're planning, but they're a great way to engage your community, bring people together, be able to share more about your work. And you also might consider press. So if you have any press contacts in your networks, then maybe you want to explore where those could take you. So that's a brief snapshot, but we'll be diving deeper into social media and email in the second half of today's session. Okay, but we're going to start out by thinking about messaging. And messaging is something that I know can feel daunting for some people. How do I make sure that I'm communicating our work in an impactful way, in a sensitive way, in a way that resonates with our communities, our internal staff, our supporters? There's a whole load of things to think about, but wanted to spend a second to also highlight how exciting thinking through messaging for this campaign is. So first of all, there's huge opportunity for your organization to obviously raise more money, but also boost your profile, showcase the value of your work. Test what messaging works on different platforms. So the great thing about social media, for example, is there's a whole lot of data that you can analyze around what posts are most successful. So there's interesting insights that you can get about what communications resonate with who. And it's also just a moment to stop and reflect. Often when we're so caught up in the day-to-day, we don't spend time thinking about what's our organization's identity, how are we communicating this? But here we have a great opportunity to think about that. And then there's also an opportunity for the sector. So with our messaging, we can raise greater awareness of the issues we're working on. We can influence narratives online. So, rather than perpetuating problematic stereotypes, disempowering tropes, we have a chance to challenge that. We can amplify the voices of women and girls in our communities, share their stories, share their quotes, their testimonials. And we can also set an example for how we want people to be speaking about our communities and speaking about our work. So hopefully that's got you feeling more excited than nervous about your messaging. And a few key things to think about. So first of all, the audience type. What are your key audiences for this campaign? Is it everyday donors? Is it higher level major donors, foundations, where you want to take a more tailored approach to your messaging? Are your trustees and volunteers a key audience? Do you want to use this campaign to get them more engaged, more involved in fundraising? Think about who you're aiming your messaging at and how you want to tailor it. What's their relationship with your organization? Are they a current supporter? They already know you really well? Or are you trying to bring in new supporters? What do they need to know about you? Where are the gaps in their knowledge? What are people's motivations for giving? And based off that, what do you want to communicate and offer? So a big motivation for practically all donors is going to be impact. And so you really want to be communicating that match funding incentive and the fact that they can double their donation, double their impact. Think about what your ask is. So with all of your messaging, we recommend including a call to action, which is basically when you tell the reader what you want them to do off the back of reading your newsletter, your social media post, your website. So a call to action might be donate now, share this post, follow us on Twitter, hold your own fundraising event for our campaign. What's your ask? And where are you going to reach these audiences? As I said at the start, really can't stress enough, when you're trying to prioritize what communication channels you use, always ask yourself, who are we trying to target and what platforms are they using? And don't forget, so often people spend a lot of time thinking about what are we going to share during our campaign, but there's also the post-campaign period where you might want to be saying thank you to your supporters, keeping them up to date with the work that you're doing with their money, encouraging them to think about supporting you with donations during other points of the year for other fundraising campaigns. So make sure that you're also thinking about after the match funding campaign. Okay, so one of the key points there was tailor your message. So a quick exercise, would love for you to, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes for a second and picture one of your dream donors for this campaign. It could be a current donor that you really want to support you. It could be a new donor that you've been trying to build a relationship with, and you feel like this could be the moment where you convert that relationship into a gift. Put yourself in their shoes. What are the top questions that they might have about your organization, the Match Fund campaign? So just 15 seconds to reflect. And I'd love for you to drop at least one question that your donor might have for you in the chat. So just 15 seconds. Your dream donor, what do they need to know? Why should I make a bigger donation? That's great. So, maybe your audience is current donors, but you want to take them to the next level. That's a really great question to think about. What impact will my donation have? 100%. We always recommend stressing not just why you need the donation, but what you're going to do with it and how that's going to be impactful. Why now? Yes. A really, really great point that we're going to come back to is how to leverage that Match Fund campaign week, how to leverage that moment and use that in your messaging. What does my donation pay for? Why would I donate again when I've donated so much already? Absolutely love that. So thinking about how are you going to use your messaging to acknowledge all of the amazing contributions you've already received from specific donors, but also make the case for another gift. What difference will it make? Why should I support you? Okay, these are all really, really interesting questions to think about. And the point of that exercise is making sure that you're tailoring your message, you're asking the questions that your donors might have. We've included some example questions here. Not going to talk that through, but so it's in the deck. And when the Big Give shares these slides, you can take a proper read. But to someone's point in the chat about answering that question, why now? Really, really recommend leveraging the Match Fund campaign itself. So in your messaging, think about urgency. One of the reasons why these sorts of time-bound campaigns work really well is that there's a very clear start and end date within which people need to make their donation. So make sure you stress, if you want to get your donation matched, you need to make it between the 11th and the 18th of October. Highlight the incentive. So obviously, if people's donations are getting matched, there's the potential for their impact to be doubled. Really, really stress that. Also speak to the moment. So I know International Day of the Girl falls at some point during campaign week. But also there's a moment in terms of cost of living, worsening inequalities. It's not a great moment to have to leverage, but it is a legitimate case for need there. And yeah, highlight the need and highlight to a lot of the questions you put in the chat, highlight the impact. So why do you need the money? And the so what? It's often what we find charities overlooking in their messages is explaining how their work is going to make an impact, the difference the work's going to make. And we just wanted to speak a little bit about cost of living, how you might want to speak about it during your campaign. And I think the first thing to say is, unfortunately, there is a lot of information and research out there which shows that cost of living is having a disproportionate impact on women, especially on those already at a greater disadvantage, facing multiple forms of inequality. That cost of living, pandemic, the discrimination and inequalities that already exist are having a kind of compounding effect. And that women and girls, it's not just women and girls communities, but also organizations, are struggling. They're facing increased demand for their work, rising costs, staff burnout. And we've included a little box of sources of information on the screen here. So think about how you might want to draw on this body of research, this evidence around the pressing need right now as part of your messaging. And then the flip side of that is, how do you make an ask when some of your supporters are going to be affected themselves by cost of living? So the first thing here is communicate the impact cost of living has had on your communities and on your organization. Use personal stories of the impact that your work has been able to have, stats, research, back up your message. Also share the great work that you're doing and the resilience your communities have shown in spite of everything. So we don't necessarily have to put doom and gloom narratives out there. It can also be stories of, look at all the amazing work we've been able to do with our communities and everything we've been able to overcome together. And also stress that donations of any size can make a big difference. So one question a kind of everyday giver might have for you is, if finances are tight right now, I can't give a lot, my donation probably isn't going to have an impact. But actually the beauty of the Match Fund campaign is their donation will be doubled. So really stress the match funding incentive, but also share how people can support your cause beyond donations. So there are ways that people can help spread the word for you, make introductions for you, advocate for your cause, hold fundraising events on your behalf. There are or even just, sign up to your newsletter and stay in the loop about future campaigns. There are so many ways that people can really get engaged and involved in this campaign beyond financial resource. So make sure that you're acknowledging and inviting that. And in a little bit, I'm going to share an example of a campaign that I absolutely love, but I want to just take a second to hear from all of you. So in the chat, what fundraising campaign has really inspired you? And maybe 1 to 2 words about why the campaign really left its mark, really had left a great impression on you. It could be a women and girls campaign. It could be a campaign from another sector. But just quickly, 15-minute share. I don't know why I keep saying 15 minutes. We don't have that much time today. 15-second share out. A campaign that's really inspired you. Okay, so an example of kind of campaign that really pulled on the heartstrings. The campaigns that are heartwarming. So there's something coming through around kind of personal stories that really bring the work to life. I'm thinking about that kind of emotional response that can encourage people to donate. We have an example of an uplifting and positive WaterAid campaign. So to my point around, it doesn't have to be doom and gloom narratives. It can be really inspiring stories that we want to put out there. And especially if we're thinking about how to avoid kind of perpetuating problematic narratives and imagery, that kind of more inspiring approach can be a helpful alternative. So there's a lot there about the emotional response, personal stories that feel inspiring. And one of the things that we always recommend when you're trying to think through your fundraising strategy is just getting inspired, looking at what resonates for you and interrogating and investigating why that is and what you might want to take forward and carry forward in your own campaign. And I just want to share this spotlight really quickly. And if you joined our training last year, then you'll be familiar with this. I'll give you a second to read it, and also a second for me to take a drink. Okay, so Mama Cash had this 10,000 euros in 10 hours fundraising campaign. And I wanted to share this because it's great on so many levels. So you have the urgency of 10,000 euros in 10 hours. You have the kind of very clear branding and imagery. You have the Mama Cash logo. There's the alliteration of 10,000, 10 hours. There's a very clear kind of call to action. So I support feminist activism. Will you? And it's also speaking to people's values. So it's really much about, I'm a feminist activist. Are you on board with feminist activism? And this is also a really great example of kind of avoiding falling into the trap of disempowering, victimizing narratives. It's a really kind of it's playing on community and shared values, which makes it really, really powerful. Okay, which leads me on to thinking about messaging for women and girls in particular. Some tips that might be helpful. So first of all, how do the people you serve want to be spoken about? And what works for your supporters? And hopefully there should be a lot of overlap there, because often our best supporters are the ones that are the most value aligned and really get the work that we're doing. If you're not sure, then ask. So do you want to let people vote on your campaign hashtag? Do you want to hold a focus group? Do you want to grab a quick 5 minutes at the end of a meeting to just talk things through? You can always just ask people. Get inspired. So what the exercise we've just done, look at other campaigns, see what you like, know what you don't want. So where are the red lines for you? What are the messages that you don't want to be putting out there? The images that you don't want to be using? And also, what are your organization's values? And how can you make sure that you're reflecting and showcasing them, but while also making sure that it's resonating with your target audiences, that they're able to understand the work that you're doing and why it's important. And again, think about how you might want to elevate and platform the voices and stories of the communities you serve to the extent that they feel comfortable with this. So one of the things that you all highlighted is the power of a kind of personal story. So also think about that. We've spoken about messaging generally, and we're going to move on now to think about communication channels. But if you have any questions about any of that, then please do drop them in the Q&A box and we'll come back to them at the end of the session. But we're going to move on now to talk about social media, because it's a very key communications channel for crowdfunding campaigns. A lot of you, as we saw in the chat, are thinking about using social media platforms this campaign. And we always recommend having some sort of strategy that underpins your use of social media. And when I say strategy, this doesn't have to be a huge document detailing everything you're going to do. It's just about making sure that your use of social media is intentional, because we know that a lot of you are lone fundraisers, you're working at organizations that are kind of limited on capacity. So you want your use of social media to be intentional and thought through. So first of all, what are your ambitions? Obviously, it's going to be to raise more money, but are you trying to gain new followers? Are you trying to build more awareness among your younger generations, in which case you want to use a platform that's popular with that audience? Are you looking to improve your own skills with social media? Are you looking for an excuse to test out a new platform? What are your ambitions? And then off the back of that, what are your goals? And for that, I'd look back on our training on Monday, where we spoke about setting SMART goals for ourselves, which are very specific, which are measurable, and which are going to help us stay really focused and intentional with our use of social media. So that could be gain X number of new followers during the match funding window. It could be create one new promotional video before the match fund starts. set some goals. And then also think about what resources do you have that you can be using to make your life easy. So we don't necessarily have to come up with a whole ton of new communication materials. Do you already have great quotes and testimonials from the communities you work with that you can share? Do you have a really strong comms person who's great at creating beautiful visuals? Do you have social media influencers in your networks, or do your trustees have kind of huge followings that you could be leveraging and drawing on? Think about what resources you have, what people you have that are going to be really helpful to activate as part of your social media strategy. Know your audience, and based on that, choose your platform. So as I said at the start, one of our key tips is meet your audiences where they're at. So is it that you have a really great following on Twitter and you know that there are a lot of really engaged people who could be converted into supporters? Is it actually there's a lot of untapped potential on our Instagram page. People are really interacting with all of our posts, and we should be focusing more on that. Know who your audiences are, know what platforms they're using, know where they're engaging with you, and prioritize a couple of platforms. You don't need to be doing everything on every platform. It's much more effective to just focus on a couple of platforms and do them really well. And then based on that, plan your engagement, plan your content. So one of the great things about social media is there are a lot of scheduling tools. So you can do a lot of the work for yourself in advance, and make your life a whole lot easier. So we spoke a little bit, well, I just spoke a little bit about thinking about what your aims and ambitions and goals are for your use of social media. So, and on this slide, we've included some examples. Do you want to educate your audiences, generate discussion, raise awareness of your work, reach new audiences, explore new tools and skills, have an excuse to branch out into a new platform? What are you looking to achieve through social media this campaign? 15 seconds. Let us know quickly in the chat. Educate. Obviously, raising money is good, hopefully an ambition for us all. But raising awareness, reaching new audiences, creating discussion, getting more shares. Yeah, so one thing to think about is the quality of engagement. So, you know, who's commenting, who's sharing, who's clicking on your links, reaching a larger audience. Okay, interesting. So keep all of that in mind when you're thinking about what platforms you want to use and how you want to use them. And we've already spoken a bit about preparing your content in advance, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there are so many tools that you can use to make your lives easier. So for imagery, think about, and visuals, think about Canva, Piktochart, Unsplash. There are so many tools you can use, and Bitly for shortening hyperlinks. To schedule your content, look at Hootsuite, look at ContentCal. They're really, really easy to use, and they also give you a lot of data. So one of the fun things about this kind of campaign, especially if you're newer to social media, is there's a lot of data that you can get out of it to use for future campaigns. So where are you getting the most shares? What time are people interacting with your posts? Do people prefer your posts with images? Do people prefer your longer form content, your shorter form content? Oh, okay. Sorry, I just read Karen's comment in the chat. Maybe try Content Cal then as well. But there are a number of scheduling tools that you can explore. Oh, or Buffer. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Karen. Okay, lots of fans of Buffer in the chat, so do check that out for scheduling. And think about time zones. So I know some charities participating this year are a bit more international, so bear that in mind when you're scheduling your content. There's some data which suggests that mornings before work, lunch times could be good times to schedule posts for, but experiment, look at your data, see what's working for your audiences. And honestly, that's one of the kind of very exciting parts of this type of campaign. And then something else to think about. So we've spoken about what your ambitions might be, what content you might want to schedule, but how might you want to leverage your supporters and your followers beyond asking them for a donation? Just a question for the group, given we have so many minds on the call today. Asking volunteers to share their stories. I absolutely love that. And as we saw earlier, those personal stories really do resonate. How else might you use your trustees, your volunteers, your followers on Twitter and Instagram? How else might you use them this campaign? Yeah, get them to share your posts, get them to help you reach new audiences, help them to, I know lots of you are looking to raise awareness, to educate. So maybe you want to put out some educational posts and encourage people to spread the word for you. Encourage discussion. So again, given a lot of you have goals of raising awareness, educating, generating some sort of discussion can be a great way to do that. Making thank yous, sharing why people are such champions of your work, asking them to kind of share what they think is special about the work that you do and what's important about that. I love all these. So I know we stressed this on Monday, but stressing it again. There are so many other people that can help you with your fundraising. So if you're sat here thinking, how am I going to plan all of this content for these different communication channels to reach all these dream audiences I have? Just take a step back and think, who do I have in my networks that can help me achieve some of those goals? And we've included a little example here of Girls Who Code, and they offer a load of toolkits to help their supporters, help them fundraise. So another thing to think about is how you might want to make it easy for people to champion your work. Is it drafting template social media posts that they can tweak and share with their networks? Is it just giving them some social media top tips so they feel empowered to kind of post on your behalf? Think about what they might need to support you, and feel free to explore these links when we share the deck with you later. And some other things to think about are not just scheduling content in advance, but also thinking about how you're reacting during campaign week and how you're making the most of the week itself. So first of all, make sure you're using the campaign hashtag and make sure you're tagging the big give. That's going to help increase the visibility of your posts, and it's going to make it easier for people to find you. You might want to share daily progress updates. So particularly if you're using platforms like Twitter, which are very fast moving, daily updates is probably a good idea. The one caveat is people can be scared to be the first person to donate. So I'd probably wait until you have some donations through the door before you start sharing updates. React. So engage with other conversations happening on the platform. Thank your supporters for their donations in real time. You don't just want to be sharing posts, you also want to be reacting to what's happening elsewhere. And get creative, have fun with it. Are there any fun challenges you want to get your followers involved in? Do you love coming up with visuals? And this is a perfect excuse to get creative and use those skills. Think about how to make this fun for you and how to make it fun for your followers and supporters to be involved with your campaign. And speaking of getting creative, getting fun, we always recommend having a campaign hashtag, which is kind of going to help you improve your reach. It's a way to kind of label your posts almost. And a few top tips are capitalizing the first letter of each word, so it's easy to read. You want it to be all one word, and keep it short and snappy. So we have some examples here of, in green, hashtags that work, and in red, the bottom hashtag does not work. It's 2 words, it's super long, it's hard to read. But just a quick brainstorm. And all ideas, this is very much an open share out, so don't feel like your hashtag has to be perfect, but just 20 seconds. What hashtags are we thinking of? Hashtag match burnt, hashtag ditch the ginger biscuit. I have a lot of questions about your campaign. It's a really great creative hashtag. I'm going to be looking out for that one. Okay, pregnancy sickness charity. Makes sense. I love that. Any other? This is really a kind of safe space share out, just to get inspired from each other. There for her. So one thing we're all doing really well is we're capitalizing each word, we're keeping them short and snappy. Hashtag match for justice. So yeah, a couple of you are kind of bringing in the match funding element and stressing that in your hashtags. Hashtag aims to inform. Excellent. Okay, so we all have an understanding of what makes a good hashtag. So yeah, feel free to keep sharing. I'm going to move on for the sake of time. There are a range of different platforms you could use. There are the usual suspects like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We spoke about them last year, so not going to spend too much time on them this year. The key things to note are, obviously, Twitter has been through some changes. Some people have moved away from the platform, but there's still a very large number of people engaged on that platform. So if you look at your following and you still have a large number of engaged users there, then stick with it. And Twitter's great for shorter form text content. It's very fast moving, so you want to be posting potentially multiple times a day. Facebook, it can be really powerful for peer-to-peer fundraising. So if any of your supporters and followers want to fundraise on your behalf, it can be great to encourage them to use Facebook. You can do Facebook Lives. There's scope for kind of longer form content. Instagram, great for visuals. Also great if you're looking to tap into a younger audience. And we'll be coming on to Threads in a little second. And LinkedIn is also an option. And one of the interesting things about LinkedIn is you can post not just from your organizational account, but also the people in your company might have LinkedIn profiles that they want to use to educate, raise awareness, and get involved. Threads. So we're going to talk about Threads, not necessarily because we recommend you use it, but just so that you're aware it exists. Our advice is always to prioritize the channels that your communities are already using and that you feel comfortable with, especially if you're short on resource and capacity. But Threads is connected to Instagram, so you log on using Instagram, you can share posts to your Insta stories. There is a text limit, and it's often kind of considered a rival to Twitter, or X as it's been rebranded. It's currently being used for conversation and dialogue, so we haven't really seen it being used a lot for fundraising directly yet. but definitely for conversation and dialogue. And I would say it's a very, it's a much newer platform. So there is still a lot of unknowns, but conversation, dialogue seems to be a key theme. And then another platform, TikTok. So this is great for visual content, videos. If you're looking to reach younger audiences, then this can be a great bet. There's a lot of creative hashtag campaigns going on. So another platform to think about. But I think some key takeaways are focus on a few platforms and doing them well. Don't feel like you need to be doing all of those. Go where your target audiences are. Think about the quality of engagement. So it's not just about likes, but it's about who's commenting, who's engaging in conversation, who's clicking on your links. Authenticity. Speak authentically and think about, is it going to be more effective for our organizational account to post or for us to post through our personal accounts? Manage your online community. So it's not just about putting posts out there and seeing what happens. You want to generate conversation, like, reply, respond. Think about your safety and well-being, and we'll come on to that. And experiment, use visuals, use formatting, use emojis, play around with the timing, with closed captions. Have some fun and see what works. And we're not going to talk through this, but if you're having questions about what do we do if people engage with our content in an unhelpful way, in a problematic way, we've included this little resource here to help you think that through. And I'm going to speed very quickly on. In the chat, what makes a great email? Very, very quick. And I'm going to come on to what we think makes a great email. Personalized, short, to the point, memorable. Yes. Loving all these. Gets attention. Yes, you need it to be opened in the first place. Well, you're all doing my job for me. You could all be sitting here right now. Yes, so our top tips are, your subject line is really important. Make it something that people want to open. Have a clear objective and purpose of your email. That's going to help you make it short, snappy, to the point. Provide enough context. So we want to keep it concise, but also, who is this audience? Are they a current donor? They know you really well, versus maybe someone who hasn't donated for a while, but is still kind of following your work. What do they need to know? Use visual formatting. So bolds, bullet points, fun colors. Keep it short, respect people's boundaries. If people don't want you to email them, don't email them. Make a clear ask, clear call to action, and test what works. Tailor your messaging and make sure you're using tools like MailChimp to help you. And we've included a little example of a great email here, which I'm not going to talk you through, but there's a really great subject line. There's the urgency of the 10,000 euros in 10 hours. There's an explanation of what the money will go towards, why the work's important. And the call to action is, I'm asking you to join me. So it's an invitation to join this community of feminist activism, which is really powerful. So I'm going to stop. Yes, I'm going to stop there to make time for Q&A. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. I guess we have a couple of questions. We can just start with maybe one for Beth, actually. Are there any sort of 2023 graphics or assets that charities can use this year?
Yes, so all of those assets can be found in the resources section of the portal. So if you log into your charity portal, go to the support section, there's a women and girls box that you can find there. If you click on that, you'll find all of our resources, including marketing assets, logos, etc., that you can use.
And then there's a question about for Caitlin, do you have any examples of how to use comms to distinguish charities from from other women and girls charities also raising funds at the same time, or any tips there?
Interesting. So there are a couple of things here. So I think one thing to say is there's something powerful about this campaign week and the fact that everyone is raising money for women and girls. And so even if it doesn't necessarily go to your organization, hopefully it is still somehow serving the communities that we care about in some way. And I would really, make sure that, so often people are really good at talking about the case for need, so the problem, why support is needed, but people can be less successful when it comes to talking about the case for support. So your organization's USP, why you're adding value, is it you're really trusted in communities? Do you have this really innovative approach? Do you have this really tried and tested approach? Make sure that you're speaking not just to the need, but also about your organization's kind of unique, what makes you unique, but also feeling good about the fact that all of the money that is kind of channeled into this campaign is going to be supporting communities we care about in some way, even if it's not going to our work.
Great. I guess a question for both Caitlin and Beth is, best case scenario, if you reach your target early on, what cons do you suggest to keep encouraging people to give? Or on the other hand, if a charity may be struggling and with a few days left and need to pivot on their cons, do you have any suggestions there?
So sorry.
Yeah,
Can we just, is the question, I'm not gonna lie, I zoned out slightly.
That's okay.
So if pivoting.
Yeah, so if a charity hits their target early, any tips for how to pivot their comms to encourage people to keep on giving, or the flip side of that, if a charity's struggling and has a few days left, any tips there on? But I guess now is probably the more actually important part, is if a charity's struggling and they need to pivot to try and get donations in.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I feel like there are two parts to this. There's like the messaging part, but then there's also like the practicalities of, I prepared all this content and it's not going as we planned, and now we have to like scramble to change our messaging. And so to the first part about like messaging itself, if you're doing really well, then that's amazing. I feel like you can acknowledge all of the contributions from your supporters, but also make it clear, if you were to receive more money, what could you do with that extra cash? What's that going to let you achieve? Equally, if you're running behind target, then, is there something messaging you want to use around the final push, around can we make it to, and I think you can change your targets throughout the course of the campaign. If it's actually, we want to get to £5,000 rather than £10,000, or we want to get to £10,000, we'll be transparent, this is where we're currently at, but with one final push, we can get to that target. There are lots of different ways that you can frame your message. And in terms of just really practically doing that, I would say scheduling is your friend. Even if you can't schedule in advance of the campaign, when you realize that you need to tailor your messaging, then can you just quickly have a template where you can edit how far you're at in relation to your target, and put that out. So scheduling, templates, they're going to be your friends, I think. Great.
And then during the campaign week, they don't have long, Rachel Bradley's asking, we don't have long, so how often do you think we should be posting about it and emailing newsletters to our audience?
I think it depends on the platform. So for example, Twitter is incredibly fast moving. So your post can kind of get lost very easily. So you might want to be posting more frequently. Whereas, a platform like email or LinkedIn, you might not want to be bombarding people multiple times a day. So I would say it depends on the platform. But you can also ask people, if you have anyone on your mailing list and you're like, oh, how did you find our emails today? Or if you've taken part in other campaigns before, how did you find that? Did it feel like a good amount? But it really depends on the platform.
And how soon should they start talking about the campaign, both on social and newsletters in advance of the campaign week?
I don't think there's a rule, but you can definitely start talking about it in advance. Let people know it's coming up, get people excited, build the momentum, make sure people are keeping their eyes out for your posts. I would say when you feel ready, but I don't know if the Big Give you've seen any timeframes that are particularly powerful.
Yeah, no, as you said, like it really depends on the organization, but I know a lot of charities in the past, they might have like a monthly newsletter that goes out. So in the month before the campaign, in that newsletter, they'll kind of soft launch it to say, oh, and by the way, we're taking part in this campaign next month. So it's kind of in people's minds, but then as you start to get close to that campaign week, that's when you start posting about it. So like that 2 weeks before, that 1 week before, and that's when you start to push out it a bit more often. So yeah, it really depends on what works best for your organization, but that's what we've seen in the past.
There's a great question that Karen's just put in the chat. Is it good to have a pinned tweet / post?
Yeah, it's a great idea to make sure that you have a tweet pinned at the top of your page, so anyone who looks on your profile knows it's campaign week, knows that they can really easily get to a place where they can donate to you. Also think about editing your bios, so your Twitter bios, your any other your Instagram bios, include links and information about your campaign there, so it's front of mind for anyone who goes on your pages.
And even your headers, like for Twitter and Facebook and
Yeah,
stuff, changing it to relate to the campaign can help as well.
Just to note that we will be sharing the slides and the recordings with everyone. So the recordings will be on our YouTube channel and the slides will be available in the support section of the Big Give account under Women and Girls. So all of this information, the slides and the recordings will be made available to everyone. Question for Beth. Could you clarify about fundraising timescales? Are people able to do fundraising events prior to the week and add funds to their campaign page during the week of the campaign, or does all the fundraising activity have to happen during the week?
So if you have a fundraising campaign that happens before the campaign starts, you'll just need to think about how you're going to add those funds to your Big Give campaign, because we're not able to allow donations from the charity itself to its own campaign. So you might want to think about, is there a trustee that can collect all of these cash donations, for example, and then make a payment from their personal card to your campaign on behalf of the people that have donated, of course, not including gift aid. So just have to kind of think a bit more about how you would manage those donations in-house. But of course, we have fundraising campaigns that also are going on separately during the week as well, where donations are being made directly through the Big Give platform. So, yeah.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, I'd probably also just clarify, talk to your sort of finance team about that. Obviously, you want to make sure that's all sort of shown correctly in your accounts if someone's sort of making proxy donations from a fundraising event. But yeah, feel free to get in touch with us. So join us on Friday for the Ask Us Anything webinar to go a bit more in depth about that. And we just have one last question. I don't know if you know, Caitlin, but from that example from that charity, did they make the 10K in 10 hours?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's they definitely tick the boxes when it comes to fundraising best practice. And so yeah, my answer is I don't know. But still useful to get inspired, even if we don't know the outcomes of the campaigns. Always recommend who inspires you, what's resonating with you, and why does that work, and what lessons might you want to take into your own communications.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. That's all the questions. So I'll let Beth wrap up And
Yeah, again, really appreciate you, Caitlin, for doing these wonderful webinars. I can see from the chat that just been so helpful. And thank you all to the charities that have taken the time out of your day to join us. And just a reminder that we have one more webinar on Friday, but if you do have any additional questions, do send us an email in the meantime. But have a lovely afternoon.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks so much,
thank you.
everyone, and best of luck with your campaigns.
Thank you. Bye.